right, welcome everybody. Great to see your faces. We are kicking off tonight with our slightly revamped schedule for the rest of Deep Dive 1. So I want to take just a minute to very briefly go over like where we are in the sequence and what you can expect for the next couple of weeks, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we'll get started. So we are meeting for 90 minutes tonight. Thank you for your stamina at the end of a long work day to come together as we try to squeeze a little extra content in to accommodate for the session we missed without having to go an extra week with Deep Dive 1. So I am going to just really briefly share my screen to show you the updates we've made to the syllabus, as well as to the learning plan and teaching channel, so you can feel really confident that you're looking in the right place and doing the right thing in any given week. And I also want to acknowledge that I know a lot of you are feeling a little bit behind with everything that's been going on, and that's okay. You can certainly, catch up when you have the space and time to do so. And really the rest of the focus for Deep Dive 1 is finishing your modules, working on those skills, working on those mini tasks. We're going to be working on it during our sessions, between our sessions, and you're going to have some time after our last session to really continue to dig into that work. So let me just briefly share the syllabus. All right, give me one sec. Too many things open. All right. So if you go to the syllabus, you will notice that we have updated it to reflect our new schedule. So we are in week 3 now. We're going by, which week of the course as opposed to which calendar week. And we have a 90-minute session tonight. Next week is week 4. It'll be another 90-minute session. And then week 5 will be our final week as planned on October the 10th, and that will go back to a normal 60-minute session. So everything's been adjusted to a 5-week calendar as opposed to the original 6-week schedule for Deep Dive 1. This syllabus is fully updated with the synchronous focus for each PLC, as well as the asynchronous learning you're expected to complete after each PLC. So when in doubt, check the syllabus. It is up to date. We have also updated our learning plan in the teaching channel. So I just want to point out that we, again, are on week 3 right now. And week 3 is where you will come to do your asynchronous work and your discussion posts after tonight. So if you're still working on catching up on weeks 1 and 2, that's okay. But in terms of being up to date for this session, we are here on week 3 thinking about mini task alignment to focus standards. And your asynchronous work after tonight is really going to be to continue your work on building in mini tasks to your instructional sequence. Okay, so that's where we are. Let me pause really quickly. Any questions about the updates to the syllabus or the learning plan? All right, if questions come up as you're doing your asynchronous work, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to clarify anything that you are wondering about. So before we dig in tonight back into skills and instruction, we are actually going to start with our coach hats on and think a little bit about, as you're working with teachers, how you can use data analytics and core tools to kind of monitor and support your teachers' work. This is something we haven't really looked at together so far. And I have asked Megan Jensen, who is a coach of coaches and a really wonderful resource in this area, to lead us through this kind of coach facilitator tip tonight. So Megan, take it away.
Thank you. And I'll introduce myself again. I know I've said my hellos in blended, especially to most of the group, but I have the privilege of working with Nicole at LDC and also with Heather. And I direct we have a grant-funded project that's happening across Los Angeles Unified and also New York City Department of Education schools, so about 50 schools in each city. And we're doing and learning the same types of things that you are, which is to stay coaching groups of teachers through these learning progressions and giving them opportunities to provide guaranteed and really standards aligned curriculum to their students. So I'm super grateful to be here with you and also watch your coaching journey and see so many parallels to the journey that our LA and New York cohorts have been moving through as well. So as Nicole mentioned, I'll take 10 minutes now. Let me set my timer so I don't go over for us. Just to review LDC Analytics, I know this is new for quite a few folks. What will happen, what's already happened, is in your Core Tools account, you have access to an analytics report. So when you get into Core Tools, Sorry, I've got all my tabs open. You're going to have a tab that says analytics on it. When you click on that tab, it's going to, I'll wait for this to open up just so you can see what I'm talking about. Right here. So on the top of your Courtable screen, you'll see something that says analytics. When you click on that, you'll be provided access to any of the teacher groups that you're coaching so that you can get that daily reporting that enables you to monitor and support teacher skill development through this learning progression. Oh, sorry. So here is what I'm going to show you a demo analytics report, and then we're going to look at an anonymous version of the report for our coaching cohort so that we can get take a little bit of a closer and contextualized look at what this data can show us. You're looking right now at what we call the teacher learning report. This is the summary card for the report. So this summary card gives us a visual timeline of the implementation that we're coaching teachers through. And it uses these little coded icons to give us more information about what we do as coaches and what our teachers do in response to our coaching. Right now, you'll see a variety of different icons on this summary card. You'll get really used to these icons. So the blue circle means module activity. That just means that the teacher took some kind of action in the module. They edited, they added a text, they added to the reflection section, they removed a skill. They're manipulating their module. That's good. That shows us people are engaged and they're doing this design work in core tools. The yellow diamond that you see here indicates coach feedback. So you'll be able to hover over and see if that feedback took the form of a comment directly in the module or took the form of a formative peer review that you left through using the curriculum alignment rubric in core tools to offer some feedback against those rubric indicators to teachers. Other icons you'll see, a really exciting icon that's super awesome to see is the pink triangle. The pink triangle means that folks have uploaded student work to their module. So that's our best way of knowing if the module was taught. And when you coach your teachers through their own learning progressions, when you have your student work analysis sessions, it'll be pivotal or imperative that these teachers upload student work so that you can all analyze the work together, look for evidence of standards in that work. The green stars you see, those indicate badges earned. Folks will earn badges for a variety of reasons. These are evidence-based badges that give us information on the competencies that teachers are developing through moving through LDC's professional learning process. You can see the badge I'm hovering over lets me know that Gallagher, that user, has completed Common Assignments Instructional Cycle 1. So he earned a certificate for completing that portion of our Common Assignments course. You'll see other badges here. This one indicates that this user earned a certificate for completing the LDC Basics course. You'll also see really lovely evidence-based badges for when people do things like earn a good to go badge for a task that they submit to LDC National Peer Review. So these are really good indicators for us as coaches of the coursework that teachers have moved through, as well as the badges that they can earn as evidence of their competency development. So if I click into this summary card, here's where I'll get a treasure trove of information that can really help me make database decisions about my coaching moves with this group. I'll do a quick hover over so that you can be familiar with the main components of the course, and then we'll take a look at our Lake County anonymous data. So you can see here, this first section of the course shows me those evidence-based badges. So I can see, okay, which folks have earned a task authorship badge. So that means they've submitted to peer review and their work was vetted as good to go or exemplary. I can also see if I hover over the task reviewer or ladder reviewer badges, I can see all the different components that are required to earn a task reviewer badge. So you don't have to keep all this in your brain. You can hover over and see, okay, has this person, in the case of Jamie Craig, this user, she's earned her trained task reviewer certificate. That means she's gone to peer review training. She earned her ladder reviewer certificate. Now she's going to be working on calibrating to the rubric to earn those points and become an expert task peer reviewer. So we can also move more of the daily work that you'll be engaging in with the analytics course is really in the, in the analytics report rather, is in the section that gives you information about where your teachers are in the coursework itself, as well as the activities that they're taking in their modules. So let's head into design assignments. That's the course that we're all living in this deep dive. And you can take a closer look to see where any given teacher is in the course. If, for instance, you just worked on session 2 in your synchronous session and you've given them a few follow-up steps to work on some content in session 3, you can check in and see how folks are doing with progressing through the content. Here's Jane Gallagher again. I can see if I hover over these check marks, she completed the getting started session, or section of the course rather. She also completed the why do this work section. She completed all 3 action items you can see there. When people complete the course block, meaning they complete all the action items in each session of the course, then they will, well, I don't have it here for you, but what you will see is a certificate. This circle will appear, you'll see an icon in here to indicate that the teacher has moved through all components of the course and has earned their certificate of completion. You'll also see, this will be really important for you. You're going to see that their module that they link to the course is also linked here in the data analytics for you to view as their coach. Right now, if I click on it, I'm not going to be able to view it because this person hasn't given me access to see their module. You'll be their coach, and they will have shared it with you, and by linking it to their design assignments course that they're working in. So this is a really nice, quick way to have all the links to the working modules in one spot. The one other item of the analytics report that you'll spend time in on a regular basis to, again, check in on that teacher engagement is the module activity tab. So you should check this data upon session completion to monitor participants' progress and identify where you want to provide feedback to the modules that they're working on. So you can do a quick visual scan, and we can see here total modules viewed and rated modules viewed. We can see, the user Jamie Craig here absolutely getting deep into looking at modules and also looking at vetted modules. We can also see what modules she's authored. We can track which modules we've left comments on as her coach. And also take a look at her engagement with her peers. We can see which modules she's provided her own comments on. So who is she helping out? As well as which modules she's offered formative peer reviews on. So that's the overview of the report. What I'd like to do is, you're gonna see me flip screen a bit. Can everybody see, I'm making sure this is anonymous, so you're not seeing any names on this. But you are seeing the summary card now for our Lake County cohort. Everybody can see that? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. So my question here for you is, just at a glance, we can see where folks are at, and we can identify what we want to see for a nice progression. When we see feedback on someone's module, for the coach, we give them some feedback, we'd really like to see a blue dot appear shortly thereafter that tells us, okay, the person's applied my feedback. They've taken that feedback and made some edits to their work. So you want to start to see that pattern, yellow diamond, blue circle, yellow diamond. And moving forward, we can also identify badges that are being earned, certificates that are being completed. I'm just going to head in, and so we can take a look at our cohort's progress through the design assignments course. I know you're not seeing exactly what I'd like you to see, but I'm going to look at this top card. It's instructional cycle 1. So based on where we are in our cohort's work, we should see that folks have completed this course for instructional cycle 1 because we worked on that in blended foundations. And sure enough, I do see, I can hover over different sessions to see some folks haven't completed all the action items, but I do see they all linked their modules to the course. So we can get a good sense of how people moved through that first instructional cycle. Let's take a quick look at instructional cycle 2 to get a sense of how we're doing as a group here. So for our homework, as it were, we were looking at sessions 4, 5, and 6. And so we can see this top user, this isn't in any particular alphabetical order, but I know this top user had completed session 4 and is working his or her way through 5 and 6. Really nice. Question for you as a group, if I'm just looking at the session progress through instructional cycle 2, how might I use the information available to me here to determine some of my next coaching steps for this top user you're seeing? Anything that sticks out to you that I might offer a little bit of feedback on?
I guess I would want to know what was just stopping them from finishing that last little section. Was there anything that I could do to help? Because they look like they're working in it, they just haven't completed it.
Nice, yeah, thanks, Beth. Yeah, likewise, you might just drill into session 5, check out, okay, what's that last action item? What's the content at the end of that section? And let me make sure if this person might need a little bit of feedback on that particular content, let me get into their module and offer that feedback. I want to show one more thing and then kick it back to Nicole because I'm over here, but this will be a huge, huge high leverage support for all of us. And it is a tip that's available in the coursework itself. So I'm going to get out of this analytics and actually just head into the design assignments course that we're in, instructional cycle 2. You just watch on my screen for now. And what I'd like you to do is notice how I'm going to head into session 6 and look for what we call the coaching for impact sections in our coaching tips right-hand bar in the courses. So these coaching for impact sessions will be incredibly useful to you as you complete the content with your team. You can see here at the end of session 6, I get information about what to do, what data to go look at. So it says, okay, check the LDC LR, that means learning report, summary card. That's that main summary with those icons on it. And I should see a pattern emerging. Blue dot, anybody remember what the blue dot was? Module activity, followed by a yellow diamond, that's my feedback, followed by a blue dot. And I know at this point in the coursework, every participant should have a blue dot indicating that they completed the activities from our last session. So what I want to do is just open up, you'll see in this these coaching for impact sessions often have documents that we can link to resources that we can open up. And this final note here leaves you a tip as the coach to provide some feedback using the comment bubbles in the modules. And we can, at this point in instructional cycle 2, we're really looking at the final skills list and the rubric that the teacher has selected. So we can open up what is a fantastic resource to help us see what the participant has done, what the teacher has done with his or her skills list. And this actually even offers some written responses, almost think of them as coaching stems, that you can copy, revise a little bit per your teacher needs, and pop into those module comments for that person. So the coaching for impact session or sections, again, on the bottom or the right-hand side of the courses will be really high leverage resources for us to use as coaches with our groups. Nicole, I'm
Awesome.
gonna hand it over to you so that we're not too far over time here. Any
Great.
quick questions about the data analytics that are relevant for the whole group before we move on? Okay. I'm also going to pop into the chat an analytics overview document that you can review after the session today. This is a really nice, or I think hopefully Heather's done that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really nice doc for you to review after that just kind of covers all the basics again. Nice one to return to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. So we really want you all to just be familiar with the resources that are available to you as coaches in working with teachers in your school sites. And I know you'll probably need some time to kind of process and check out analytics on your own. Then you can let us know if you have follow-up questions. That overview doc is really helpful, but we just wanted to give you a taste of that. Now we are going to switch back into learner mode and do some work on our own modules. So I know you've been strapped for time in between sessions, so we're going to really use our time in the session tonight to do some of this work. we are going to actually split into 2 breakout rooms, which is a pretty cool feature of Zoom if you've never used it before, so that we can have slightly smaller discussion groups. And we're going to do some informal workshopping of our skills list. So if you've done work on your skills list, great. If not, we can use this as a chance to do some of that thinking together. I'm going to really briefly introduce the skills list workshopping protocol that we're going to use. Then we're going to go ahead and split into the 2 rooms and just spend some time working together. So Heather, if you could pop the link to that workshopping protocol in the chat, I'm also going to share it on my screen. And you will notice it should look very familiar. It's formatted very much like the task workshopping protocol that we became so familiar with in Blended Foundations. I'm not going to ask you to read through most of this because it's going to be really familiar. I'm just going to point your attention to the actual protocol for talking through a skills list at the bottom of page 1. So really, this is going to be an extension of the work we did last week in the Learn tab. We're going to do it with our actual modules and just thinking about what are the thinking steps of our task, and then what needs to be in the skills list to support that, and how can we think about naming and defining our skills really clearly as enduring skills that are still customized to the thinking steps and demands of our task. So this is what we're going to be using in our sessions together. Take a moment to get into the document on your own screen. So if you're still full screen in Zoom, go ahead and exit full screen, open the link in the chat to get into the Skills and Instruction Workshop protocol. And as you do that, I'm going to send us into breakout rooms. So half of you will be in a breakout room with Megan, half of you will be in a breakout room with me. It's going to just send you a prompt that all you have to do is click accept, and it'll bring you into that breakout room, and we'll move forward from there. So right now you should just be opening the protocol that was just linked in the chat and waiting for a message to pop up in Zoom to invite you into a breakout room.
It's cool.
Pretty neat.
The others have been ousted from our island. Out of here.
Hey, everybody.
That's awesome.
All right. So we now have a little bit of a cozier group in which we can really do some work together. So I know you didn't have a lot of heads up to prepare for this, and that's okay. This is really just an opportunity to work together. So I'm going to ask if there is anybody here who would be willing to volunteer to open up your module and just do some thinking together about that skills list. Again, even if you haven't done any work in there yet, now is a great opportunity with colleagues to think about how can you customize that default skills list to support your task. So who will be our brave soul and volunteer?
I don't mind us being the brave souls. I will tell you that we had a session with Barb the other day, and our task itself still needs tweaking. So it might change. So whatever we decide with the skills, it might not stay, because once we go back and tweak our task, it might affect next steps.
That's totally fine, and a really great point to surface, because there's a reason that we try to get that task as solidified as possible before we build the ladder, because they're so tightly related that when one changes, the other necessarily has to change as well. But I bet there are certain things that we can identify even with your task in its current form. So why don't we go ahead and dive in there? So if you wouldn't mind, Beth and Jen, one of you opening up your module and just popping the link to that module in the chat here for everybody else to also get in there in Core Tools and take a look, that will really allow us to do this work together.
I have our module open on my screen already. I'm trying to figure out how I share it, the link to it. Do I literally just copy and paste it from the
address bar, the URL?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm doing that right now.
And
Beth, I got
everyone
it.
in the group has permission to view because it's in our cohort collection.
Okay. And now I've got to figure out how to send you guys in this cool little thing. How do I send you guys a chat with the link? Is it under more? I got it. I'm there, just slow.
No worries.
Here it comes. Wait for it. Boom.
There it is. Awesome. All right, I see everybody's initial bubbles popping up in the module, so that's excellent. And then, Jen, would you like to share your screen, or would you like me to share the module on my screen?
If you want to coach me through that, I'd be happy to.
Absolutely. So all you need to do is hover over the Zoom window with your mouse, and the black bar at the bottom of the window should have a little rectangle with an arrow that says share screen.
Okay, well, right now I'm going to share you, and then my desktop, and then share screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Okay.
Great job, Jen.
Yay.
All right. So we are going to kind of walk through the protocol in a relaxed way. And Jen and Beth, you can guide us also to what kind of input would be really helpful to you. But the first step in thinking about the skills is revisiting the task itself, of course, because it's all about alignment. So let's take a quick look at your task prompt and your focus standards. And then that's going to lead us into thinking about how the skills list can support those key demands. So will you read your task prompt to us, please?
Yes. After reading hotter air may lead planes to carry fewer passengers, write an informational essay in which you describe the relationship between temperature and the effects it has on matter, such as water. Support your response with evidence from the text.
Okay, and let's take a quick look at your focus standards.
That works.
So like all of us in the cohort, you're using your grade level version of that RI3, which is about the relationship between ideas and concepts, right? And then you've got your content standard about changes water undergoes in its various states, and your writing standard about creating an informational explanatory piece, okay? So to the group, let's discuss. What do you notice in this task and its focus standards as key skills that you think students are going to need to be able to respond and show mastery of these standards in response to the prompt? We can just kind of popcorn them out there. What do you see as some key skills students are going to need for this task?
I think that one of the enduring skills would be in the writing form, what an explanatory or informational prompt looks like. What type of language or what type of structure would I have in order to satisfy that type of writing demand?
Okay. So I'm copying down these thoughts in the chat. So there's going to be a key piece of the writing. Yeah.
I would think along with what Jen's saying in the writing component, something about integrating, you know, because it talks about support your response with evidence from the texts. So possibly that skill set of integrating quotations or integrating evidence from a source into our own writing.
So citing text evidence.
There you go. So citing.
Okay.
So those feel like two really key demands for the writing process, sort of the structure and form of an informational piece and the ability to cite and integrate evidence from text. What about the content and the reading process? What sort of skills are students going to need to apply as they learn this content and read the text?
They're going to have to understand the process that water goes through when it applies to heating and cooling, especially in this standard in third grade, how it deals to molecules and the changes that water goes through in this state and how it affects it. So I feel like for that content standard, this is really one of the first times they start to see this type of how water changes, not in the water cycle, but more through molecules and the states that it's in.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you're pointing to a really important content comprehension element of this module. And here's the kind of interesting part, at least again for me, because I'm geeky about this stuff. But because this is an LDC module and students are learning the content really through the reading process, we know what understanding we need them to walk away with. So what reading skills might they apply in order to get that content understanding?
So I haven't read the text, but I would definitely bet that there's probably some inferential, you know, they're gonna have to come to some inferences possibly, and, you know, draw and logical inferences, or does that work?
Right. Yeah, and that goes with, we talked to Barb yesterday, we're gonna add another text because this one alone wouldn't have given them enough information to kind of make those inferences.
Gotcha.
So that's definitely something we're going back to tweet. So yes, I definitely think so. we went from we're like giving it all to them to kind of giving none of it to them. We went like, so I hear that inferencing, and yeah, we definitely need to give them a little bit, just a little bit more so they can make that inference.
Okay.
I also feel like they're going to need to understand the reading skill of like cause and effect.
Yes. Yes.
I see lots of nodding happening. Okay. So that's really powerful. That gives us something to read for, right? So whether they're annotating or filling out a graphic organizer, whatever the activity ends up being, the skill is reading for cause and effect. So that's going to help guide then some of your instructional decisions as well.
So if I could add on to the cause and effect piece, I think it also speaks to when you think of 3.3 with the reading piece, really getting kids to understand that the language that pertains to that specific, like whether it's time, sequence, cause or effect, and how that language can be used to describe the relationships of those events. So it's also that whole language piece within the text that you're choosing.
So I want to connect what you just said, Megan, to what Tabitha said in the chat, which was essential vocabulary and understanding scientific terms. And then Megan, you added kind of another angle to that, which is using that academic vocabulary around the science content. And that's clearly called for in the standards about using that language of time, sequence, cause, and effect. So that's another key demand of the standard that can be addressed in the skills.
Now, can I ask this question? Like, I'm thinking back to last week. And so I see how we're going through this, and this is really, great work because we're really focusing it into what does my task or our task, what do I need to teach explicitly to get them to this, final product, for lack of better words. My question is, how does this all line up in regards to hitting underneath those 4 components of what is a instructional ladder?
Yeah, awesome question, Jen. So let's look there now. We've identified some of the key demands of the task. I'd say we don't want to go too much farther than that. We don't want to break it down into like so many pieces that it's not coherent. So let's scroll down now to the instructional ladder and think about where we would want to slot in these skills, whether by adding a skill or customizing a skill that's already there, so that the sequence makes sense, so that those 4 clusters are really fulfilling their purpose, right? So if you could scroll down for us a little bit.
Absolutely.
And then in section 2, before you go too far, if you can hit that blue view skills only.
Okay.
That will kind of collapse it down so that we can see things all together in one place. Okay. So you pointed out, Jen, that you're thinking about these different skill clusters and what goes where, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we see the purpose of these 4 clusters. What do we think is really the essential purpose of the preparing for the task cluster?
Building background knowledge, like activating that background knowledge and what we bring to the reader or bring to the task as a reader. Absolutely.
That's one key purpose. I'd say there's one more.
Understanding what the task is asking of me.
Exactly. Those are the 2 key components of preparing for the task. Regardless of how you break that out or what you call it, that's really what that cluster is there for. So it's building the bridge of what we already know to what are we going to need to know to accomplish this task. And like we talked about last week, that's really about bringing the backwards design to students and not just in our own heads as teachers, but giving them a deep understanding of what they are going to be asked to do. And that gives them something to tie everything else to throughout the course of the module, to know why they're learning certain vocabulary, why they're reading the text, for what purpose. So right now, there's several things going on here in the preparing for the task cluster. What of the skills that we just talked about together and listed seem like the absolutely essential skills that need to go here in preparing for the task?
Well, again, I think all of it's important. Where you do it within the task, I guess, would be maybe where our teacher preference comes in, or our teacher differences. But I do feel like the vocabulary, depending on what we're looking at, might come in for preparing for the task. Like I might need them to understand some key vocabulary words, either where it's to the task or whether it's to what we're about to read from the passages or texts.
Absolutely. Yeah, essential vocabulary, it can sometimes be in preparing for the task, sometimes in reading process, sometimes in both places. It really just depends on how you're using it. So it might make a lot of sense to do some front loading of essential vocabulary before the reading process if they're going to be encountering new things. Other people sometimes put essential vocabulary in the reading process, so it's kind of like as you encounter it in the text, you're dealing with it. Again, that is a matter of sort of teacher preference and appropriateness for the particular module.
Nicole, would there be any learning from what happened last time? Would there be, like as Beth and I start to put these skills together, when it goes to our next peer review, is there going to be any kickback when we would decide that as to, well, that person's perspective saying, I think it would make more sense here, or will they kind of, so to speak, I have a hard time understanding how they're going to know what our thought process is as to where we put some of these skills.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Jen. Yeah. And I mean, the idea is that we try to ask our reviewers to really stick with what's in the rubric, but things are open to interpretation when you think about how things are clustered and sequenced. I think typically the rationale for where you put skills becomes clear as you continue on and review the mini tasks and you look at the notes and the instructional strategies, which usually should say a little something about the purpose of that mini task and how it fits into the sequence. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we can often see the author's thinking to understand their rationale for something.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's look at the reading process, I think, because that's where so much of the meat of the module takes place. And what you have from the default skills list that was automatically built in is like super generic, right? There's reading for explicit understanding and there's analyzing the text. So these are going to be generally useful skills for pretty much any reading task, but we can probably think about ways to customize these or build on them a little bit to capture some of the demands that we talked about a few minutes ago. So I'll ask, what skills do we think might need to be added here? And how can we name them and define them to accomplish what we want to accomplish? Let's start with just the first part of that question. What skills from the ones we talked about earlier need to be added to the reading process section?
Cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
The inferencing.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the two key ones, because if we
yeah, I didn't see the chat. What did I think you said Tabitha put something in there. What was her suggestion?
Hers was around essential vocabulary.
Oh, okay.
Right. So if we do the essential vocabulary at the top and preparing for the task, and we keep cause and effect and inferencing in the reading portion, would that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Right, because what you put in the reading process is going to be whatever they're doing with the texts that you have selected for your module.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Those are the two main ones, Jen, I would think we'd have to cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want it to be so big. So is 2, I hate to say, but is like 2 a nice number? Because this is only supposed to be a 1-week module.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we don't want to.
Yeah.
I say yes.
Yes. You say yeah now, and I think, because I do think, Jen, both of them would have to be in there. I don't think we could get away with one or the other.
No, I agree.
We have to. Okay.
I was wondering if so Beth, I'm coming back to like the coursework that we did last week, which is that of course every single module you're not going to have every single skill,
right?
And therefore, mini tasks to every single skill, but we're really honing in on. So I would think, especially for 1 week, that would make sense.
Yeah. Okay. No more than that, right? That'd be overwhelming any more than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, especially when you consider the fact that every skill has to have at least one mini task attached to it. But you do have the opportunity to put multiple mini tasks under a skill if you think that it would make more sense chunked that way. So having 2 skills still gives you flexibility in how much instruction you provide around the text. Or you might have, you know, a mini task for one text and a mini task for the second text under the same skill. There's different ways to shake out that relationship between skill and mini task.
Now, I don't know, again, I think this is just going to be on, some people see it one way and some people might see it another way, but I do even think Seth mentioned citing text evidence, and I could even see that for part of it being the actual citing it, the writing portion of that, but the other part of me says I could see where I'm teaching this skill of pulling out text evidence, going into the reading process. Either way we slice it or dice it, it's going to fall under either the writing, it's still going to be there, it's going to be somewhere evident in our instructional ladder, but it's not necessarily, like, so does it matter where that goes?
That's a really great question. And I think that when, especially when you're thinking about younger students who might really be developing that skill, I like to see it in both places, to be honest, because it's kind of 2 sides of the same coin. In the reading process, it might be like selecting relevant evidence, because as they're reading, they're thinking about the task prompt, which pieces of this are going to be most useful to me, am I going to use in my final paper? And then in the writing process, it's more about, now, how do I use that? How do I actually get it into the writing and cite it properly? So I can definitely see a really strong rationale for having selecting text evidence as being a part of the reading process as well, so that on an ongoing basis, they're thinking about what details are going to be most useful to them in answering the prompt.
Okay, and so then one more question as a follow-up to that. If we put it in both, because I think that's what I heard you saying, like I could see why it would be both. I don't have to have 2 different, I'm forgetting the verbiage you used. I don't necessarily have to have a mini task for each time, do I? Because when I think back to a mini task, I'm thinking about formally assessing it some way, or informally, some way assessing to see that these kids are transferring this knowledge. So what I need to have in my instructional ladder where it's cited 2 different times, or stated 2 different times, 2 different mini tasks, or could they be the same?
Anyone want to take on that question before I?
My vote's for 2.
Why that?
Because I think we're looking at 2 different things. You said when we're looking for it at reading, we're looking at how we're going to pull it out, and then in the writing, how are we going to use it?
Yeah.
I agree. I
That's my vote. I vote for
Thumbs
2.
up from Nicole.
Well, it's all about a democracy, so sounds like it's decided.
But if you hadn't asked that, I wouldn't have even gone, like, I wouldn't have even put it in both. Like,
And in hearing you question that back, I agree. My school of thought as to previously, before I heard you say that back to me, was just that normally if kids can think it and speak to it, which I would hope would manifest itself in the instruction, that typically if they can think it and speak it, they can write it. It might not be spelled correctly, it might not be grammatically correct, but they can typically have it manifest itself. I understand the application in the writing. Good talk, Russ.
Yeah, that's a really great and powerful conversation you're having, because in a sense they're so tied together, but they are sort of 2 different skills. They're really tightly related, 2 sides of the same coin, but one is a reading skill and one is a writing skill. And so you see it reflected in its own unique way in each place.
Got it.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do in our last few minutes before we go back to the big group and start thinking a little bit more about mini tasks, which is where we're going to transition from here, is just to make sure everybody's comfortable with how to actually manipulate the skills list in core tools, because I know you might not have had many opportunities to do that so far. So Jen, tell me if you're comfortable remaining my guinea pig and taking some instructions, or if you want me to share my screen and just demonstrate a couple things.
You got it. I'm on it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so to edit your skills, you're gonna kind of scroll back up just so you can see the top of the skills section in Core Tools, and hit that red edit in the upper right-hand corner. There you go. That's going to put you in edit mode. Okay. And what you can then do is edit the skills that are already there, or you can add and remove skills. So for instance, I noticed that you have 2 task analysis skills under preparing for the task right now. You're probably going to want to delete one of those. So go ahead and click those 3 dots right where your mouse is right now.
Whoa, that went crazy on me. Okay.
And that's going to give you the option to delete a skill.
Okay.
Okay. So there you can actually, delete skills that are present if they're not useful to you, if they are redundant, if they're irrelevant to you, you can just take them out entirely. If you want, you can go ahead and click yes, because you're still going to have a task analysis skill left there.
Okay.
Now let's go down to the reading process. We noticed that there were some skills that are not yet present that we want to add. So you're going to select the button that says add skill at the bottom of that skills cluster. Now this is going to give you 2 options. You can choose from default skills, which you can use that drop-down menu to kind of look and see if there's anything already there that you might want to use. But again, the default skills tend to be pretty generic as they are default. They're designed to be kind of generally useful for everybody. But hey, look, I see in post-reading, there's a gathering evidence skill.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to check that out.
Okay, so in this process, this makes sense to me now. In this section of reading process, I might put gathering evidence, but when Beth and I go to do the same thing in the writing process, we might be citing evidence.
Exactly.
Listen,
exactly.
We understand. We got this.
And then you can just hit add at the bottom, and that's going to appear as part of your reading process.
Sweet.
Within your reading process, you can reorder things just by dragging and dropping. It's a little clunky. I'll just tell you, in Core Tools, it lags a little bit, but you can just drag and drop to reorder. You can also edit. So there you go. Nice drag and drop. So you might notice that right now, the default skill of gathering evidence doesn't have a definition. That's that ability to statement that every skill needs to have. So as you're building your list, you're going to want to make sure that every skill has a definition that starts with ability to and kind of describes a little more detail about what is the skill, what is it the students are developing. So how might we define the skill of gathering evidence here? The ability to what? And anyone can chime in.
Hold on, I'm making a note. To statement. Okay.
What do you guys think?
So something like the ability to use specific text references when stating an answer or supplying a thought.
It's a good starting point.
I'm giving you guys a starting point. There it is.
Beth, you're muted. Beth, we couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I said I just wish we could have put that on the screen because I'm so visual that I can't.
Oh, hold on. I think I can edit it. Hold on, Charlie Brown.
Nice.
Here you go.
Okay.
An ability to statement.
And remember, this is the reading side of it, not the writing side. So you're free to fuss with this however you like, but I can imagine it being something like ability to select relevant details to respond to a prompt or something along those lines.
Because that is very standard-ish lingo. So it's okay to pull in that from another standard. And
Standard language is often really, really helpful for skill definitions. It can really make that connection. So that's a great tip.
I'm on that.
I got it. Yeah, hang on.
I'm going straight to it.
I'll race you.
They're crazy.
Oh my gosh, the pressure is real. Where's our other island friends? I feel like we've...
Wow, it's updated. Did you see that when you just pulled that up?
This is third grade.
Did you edit it on your end, Beth?
I got like a new updated version of my app. I was like, oh.
All right. So we need to rejoin the big group or call the big group back together.
This is my favorite thing ever, Nicole. Like,
I like this small group.
This is great.
Good. Okay, I'm so glad. hope that was valuable for everybody in just thinking through, like, how do you manipulate these skills to get them to accomplish what you need to in your instructional ladder to support the task. So thank you so much, Beth and Jen, for volunteering. And I am going to, yes.
Welcome.
I'm going to call everybody back.
Mine,
right.
I'm at 7%, and I'm not charged. Not good.
Sorry again, you girls and boys.
Why am I not charging? Hang on.
Give the other half a little time to wrap up their conversation and re-enter the big room.
We're back.
Awesome. Sorry, I know it can be a little bit abrupt when you get called back.
That's good. Susan, thank you for your final thought. I thought it was a really great one.
Thank you.
All right. Well, as we're all reconvening here back in the big room, I know we had a really productive conversation about customizing skills. I would love to hear just one or two ahas or takeaways from either group from that experience.
I have to. I'm sorry. I feel like I always talk, but that was amazing. I felt like for the first time that Jen and I got to have a conversation with somebody who knew more than us and was guiding us through that. And that was so helpful because we go back and forth, but we're like, but you guys did. And you were able to confirm or guide us in a different direction if we needed to. That was great. Great.
Awesome. What about somebody from the other room?
I agree. It was very helpful for me just to think with Norris as she was going through her process to help me, because honestly, I have not picked my skills yet. I was waiting to workshop first before I just go digging in. So it was very helpful to be able to, in a smaller group, ask those questions and really see her work and her thinking behind how she chose her skills. But that's what I wanted to see. Did she choose her skills based on the sequence of how she was actually going to teach the lesson? So that was helpful for me just to be able to get my thinking, surround my thinking around when I build my own skills.
Good. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that that was a useful experience. As you all are working on your skills, keep those conversations in mind. And I also just wanted to let you know, as part of the bigger plan, each of you should have heard from one of us to schedule a one-on-one to workshop your task using the feedback that you got from National Peer Review. When we conclude Deep Dive 1, we're going to be offering you a couple of forms of support to really shape up and finalize and feel confident with your skills and instruction before you submit to National Peer Review this time. So we will offer one-on-ones again between the conclusion of Deep Dive 1 and when you submit to National Peer Review. And also, when we come in person the first week of November to do a peer review workshop, that's where we're going to be spending a day and a half working with you all and learning how to review modules. That tends to be a really eye-opening experience, and people take away a lot of learning that they want to apply to their own module. So it's a day and a half, and on the afternoon of that second day, we're going to have a big old work session where you have the opportunity to work on your module and apply the things that you've learned through the peer review workshop before you submit your own module to be peer reviewed. So we hope that that timing will really feel right and give you the chance to do the supported work that you need to do with your skills and instruction before you get that formal review through National Peer Review. Sound good? All right. So I know it's kind of a shift and we have a longer session tonight. So I hope everybody can kind of like taking a deep breath and like shaking it out after our intensive work just now on skills. But we are going to spend the last half hour of the night now looking ahead and thinking about mini tasks. So the two kinds of thinking really go hand in hand. I know we even talked a little bit about mini tasks in our group while we were talking about skills, because the relationship is so integral between those two things. But once you really have your skills list in place, your next step is going to be to think about the mini tasks that will allow you to provide the instruction that students need to master that skill, and offer you that formative assessment opportunity to see, get a little dipstick, see how your students are doing with that skill and in their progression towards the final teaching task. So that's why we're going to turn our attention now to mini tasks. We are at the halfway point of Deep Dive 1. And what that means, along with our shift to mini tasks, is even though we only spent a little tiny bit of time in instructional cycle number 2, once you finish your skills list, you're actually transitioning right on into instructional cycle number 3. Because just as we discussed with the spiraled structure of the course content, IC1 is really about tasks, IC2 is really about skills, and IC3 is all about those mini tasks in that instructional sequence. So IC3 is where we're going to do our work for the rest of tonight, and where you will do your work around building mini tasks into your instructional sequence for this module. Again, I know it's a little rapid fire, but it's just about getting the key chunks of content from each instructional cycle to become familiar with them, to help you in your own work and to help you in working with teachers. So we're going to go now into Core Tools. We're going to go into the Learn tab, and we're going to look at some key content in instructional cycle 3 in session 5 around mini tasks. I'm going to navigate to where we need to go on my own screen, and I'll ask Heather to pop the direct link to that session into the chat, or you can follow along as I model the progression. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. We're in design assignments. Again, I just want to be very clear, even if it's super annoying right now that I'm repeating myself, that we're going into IC3, because that's the first time we've really gone into that cycle. And we are going to be working in session 5 called Analyze Mini Task Alignment. So I'm going to open that tab now. What we're going to do tonight is very similar to what we did last week. We're going to analyze examples of mini tasks to think about how they align to a task and to the focus standards of the task, to give you something to anchor your understanding of mini tasks before you work on your own. So we're going to be analyzing samples of mini tasks tonight to think about alignment. So everything that we're doing here together is about alignment. You've heard the word ad nauseum, but it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another thing to really make it work and to get tight alignment between your task, your skills, and your instruction. And that's why we're going to spend some time looking at examples. So whenever we're building our instructional ladder, we're going to think about, first, does that skills list align and enact your focus standards? And then when you feel confident that your skills represent the thinking that students need to do, you can start thinking about aligning mini tasks to those individual skills and thinking about how they connect all the way back to the overarching task and focus standards. First, we're going to just refresh our memories a little bit on what is a mini task and what makes a mini task unique in comparison to just any old daily lesson. We talked about this a little bit at the Summer Institute. If you were in that first teacher PLC, it was talked about a little bit there, but it's such an important bit of content that I don't think we can address it too many times. So if you are in IC3 session 5, please scroll to the section called Characteristics of an LDC mini task, and take just a few minutes to read through that section. You'll notice there's some show hides that you can use if you want a little more elaboration of each term. And you're going to read through to right below this picture of the soup, okay? So you are going to take a few moments to read through Characteristics of an LDC mini task, and you're going to stop right after the picture of the soup. I will leave that up on my screen as a reference guide. Great thinking, everybody. So common themes emerging in the chat. Explicit instruction, although that doesn't necessarily mean direct instruction, DI. Students are producing something, there's a product, and it's small chunks teaching specific skills. Seth, you mentioned the idea of a product a couple times. You want to say more about why that's important?
I was just thinking of, going back to Eleanor Doherty's work in her book Assignments Matter, and just she kind of talks about there are different activities. Oftentimes we see activities, or we kind of come into this work thinking, oh, I do that too. I do that all the time in my lessons. But the difference between just an activity, but then an actual like product through this lesson, they're gonna produce something. Granted, it might not always be a piece of writing, but
I also noticed what it said earlier about how with these mini tasks that we want to ensure that the students are able to master the skills that we're teaching them before we go to that final product. So this gives them, if we have a product, if we can see what they're doing rather than teaching it and hoping it sticks, if we can see what we're doing, then we can revise our instruction or do whatever it is we need to do to make sure that they were able to do that before we throw them onto the final product.
Absolutely. So, sorry, I'm just chuckling at the chat. That's really the key, right? If mini tasks are supposed to serve the dual function of instruction and formative assessment, you can't assess where students are if they're not doing something that can give you evidence. It doesn't have to be a formal written product. It can be a think, pair, share. That sharing part gives you evidence. It can be a quick write. It can be a graphic organizer. It can be their very annotations on the text itself. You know, evidence can come in many forms, but students are doing something. So a mini task is really a very student-centered model of the daily instruction that you build to lead up to your final task and to develop those skills that we've identified in our skills list. So we want you to really just absorb that and let it guide your thinking around mini tasks. But again, ultimately, when you're thinking about how useful is a mini task in the context of a module, that's going to come right back to the question of alignment. Does it really address the skill that it's attached to? Does it really support students in doing the thinking work of the task and of the focus standards? So that means, as always, before we analyze mini tasks, we have to think about the tasks that they're attached to. So we're going to analyze an example together for this ELA task about flowers for Algernon, which we all probably remember from 8th grade or whenever it was that we read that very common text, or perhaps not. But on my screen here, I'm at the section called Do Now, Analyze Mini Task Alignment, and it's fine for you to just follow along on my screen at the moment instead of being in your own window. And what we're going to do is make sure that we understand what the task is all about and what its focus standards call for, so that we can look for how well that's supported in some of the mini tasks in the instructional ladder. So this task asks, how does Keyes, the author, use Charlie's reflections to expose his persona? After reading the short story Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, write an essay in which you explain how Keyes reveals aspects of Charlie's character over the course of the text through pivotal lines of your choosing. Support your discussion with evidence from the text. So this task really focuses in on Reading Standard 3. If you remember our development over the course of a text, that's what we're looking at here in the context of reading literature, and for 8th grade in particular. It's all about character and about how particular lines of dialogue or incidents propel the action, reveal aspects of a character, you can see that highlighted in red here, or provoke a decision. So that's the thinking work students are really being asked to do, to hone in on specific moments in the text over the course of the text and think about how they reveal aspects of that character, okay? So keep that in mind as we look now to thinking about how some instructional support is provided for that in the form of mini tasks. So right below this example, there's a blue button called Explore the Instructional Sequence. And that is going to pop open my sidebar with instructions for the next activity. We are going to be following these instructions to analyze really one particular mini task in this instructional ladder, although you're welcome to spend some time scanning the whole thing and thinking about the overall structure. But I'm going to ask everybody now to go into their own Learn tab if you're not there already. And underneath of that task example that we just looked at together, click that blue button that says Explore the Instructional Sequence, and wait for that sidebar to pop up, and go ahead and click the module to open it within the main body of your Learn tab window. All right, I see lots of people popping into the module. That's good. So I'm going to ask you to spend about 6 or 7 minutes following steps 4 through 5, or really 3 through 5 here in your sidebar. So you're going to take a quick peek at the skills list for this module. You're going to notice it's not quite as customized as some of the examples we've seen before, but you can see that the module author's done some work in laying out a reading process for students. But really what we want you to look at is a specific mini task linked in instructional step number 5. There's a whole bunch of mini tasks in this module, so I would strongly, strongly recommend that you use the link that's directly embedded in the instructions rather than trying to sort through and find the mini task on your own in the instructional ladder. So you might not even know that's a link because if you hover over it, it's not totally obvious, but where it says take some time on the 3rd mini task, short constructed response, that is a link that goes straight to the mini task in question. One of the things you're going to notice is that most of the meat of this mini task is actually in the attachment. So you're also going to need to open the attachment, the student handout, to be able to do this analysis. Okay, so I just gave you a bunch of steps at once, but to summarize really quickly, we're going to spend about 6 minutes following steps 3 through 5 of the instructions for analyzing mini task alignment. And just let me know in the chat if you have any questions. As you get to the point where you've had a chance to really look at that mini task that's linked in the instructions, take a look at the discussion questions in step 6 of the instructions. And then I'm going to invite you to come back to the chat. And my discussion question is going to be really general. What do you notice and what do you wonder from looking at this mini task and from this activity and those discussion questions? What do you notice and what do you wonder? Whenever you're ready, go ahead and come back and post in the chat. Wherever you are in the process, since we only have about 5 minutes left together, go ahead and come back to the chat and start posting. Enter the conversation that's been started here. A couple of common themes emerging already. This module is an interesting test case for the question of how much is too much. There can be such a thing as over scaffolding or spending too long on something. It's important to try to recognize that line, but I'm curious to hear what else you noticed and what else you're wondering after looking at this module and that specific mini task. I want to focus in a little bit on what Megan posted in the chat, which is how very clear it is in the case of that particular mini task that was linked from the instructions, the short constructed response, that the module author was thinking really explicitly about reading standard 3 in the construction of that graphic organizer, use language directly from it. You know, they're not shielding the standard from students. They're bringing it out to the surface and making it very clear, this is what we're breaking down, this is what we're practicing, this is what we're developing the ability to do. And I think that mini task is an interesting example too of providing explicit instruction around a skill that's not direct instruction, right? Because the planning work that's gone into that graphic organizer involved the teacher doing some loading of thinking around what are some really key segments of the text and lines that students can analyze, you know, what do they need to break down about each quote to start their thinking about standard 3, how does this propel the action, what does this reveal about the character, you know, all those important elements. And then students in the process of working through that are doing their thinking work to develop that skill and gaining material that they can then use in the final product. So that's a pretty detailed scaffold. You can tell that they're focusing in on that standard and explicit support from it rather than just expecting students to know how to do it as they read and annotate the text. Sometimes instructional support looks a little heavier like that. Sometimes it looks a little lighter. You can imagine there might be some modeling and discussion going on around that. All those different modes of instruction can fit into a mini task. And this is just one example of using a really concrete tool like a graphic organizer to get kids thinking in the mode of the focused reading standard for the module. All right, that's been a lot to process and we are at the end of our time. You can see everybody's a little sleepy. I thank you so much for your flexibility in coming together for an extra long session. I hope that this session was valuable for you tonight. In thinking about next steps, you are continuing to build your skills list and you are beginning to think about mini tasks. So you're going to do that work around mini tasks right here where we are in Core Tools, in Instructional Cycle 3, Sessions 5, which is where we are now, and Session 6, which will really guide you through the process of thinking about how do I find mini tasks that are a good fit for the thinking work I want my kids to do, and then maybe think about beginning to adapt and customize those. Like I said earlier in the night, this focus of getting our skills and instruction really nailed down is going to be the body of our work together for the remaining sessions in Deep Dive 1, as well as the weeks that follow. So as always, feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. We're here to support you. We're happy to answer questions through email, or you get in touch any other way to help you out as you're doing this work and just help get through any of those sticky spots that you sometimes encounter when doing your work on your own. So we're going to end the night as we usually do with a little reflection, a final word whip. What is one word or phrase that's resonating with you right now based on our work together tonight? And once you have posted that in the chat, you can go on about your night, get some rest, and we will look forward very much to seeing you next week, same place, same time. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and we will see you next week.